As far as Russia and China, do you think that it's more of a control aspect or more of a friendly trade? Because from what it seems like to me, it's more of like just a trade, friendly trade versus what the United States and France has been wanting to do in that region.
Well, here's the other issue, right? America has to constantly fight socialism and communism everywhere. It must. If it doesn't, then the past 70 years of Cold War were all a lie. Well, we don't want to say that. I mean, it was all a lie, but we don't want to tell people that it was all a lie, right? So we have to keep fighting against, because, you know, if Mali goes socialist, the whole world will be communist tomorrow under one dictator. That's going to happen, right? That's right. Every time, right? That's the story to tell us every single time. That's why we fight every war, right? So we have to. It's almost like if I tell you that I'm a vegetarian and I really want to eat meat, whenever I'm in front of you, I gotta not eat the meat. Otherwise, I look like an idiot because I said I'm a vegetarian. Even though I like meat, I gotta say it. I gotta do it in front of you. It's like that. I've told people for decades that if we let any country go socialist, the entire world will be stuck under a one world communist dictatorship. That's what I've told people since 1945.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to keep fighting it. Otherwise, I'm a liar.
It's happening. So, African NATO. So, West African nations form a defensive bloc as of recently. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have signed a mutual defense pact that recently defend the trio from Western interference, especially from France. In recent months, and many of you have watched on this channel, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have had military coups that ousted the French control to solidify national sovereignty and self-determination against the West. Now the defense is on, and they're ready to defend each other if, or really when, the West attempts to take it over once again. So I'm going to be sharing this article from Democracy Now! That actually shows what has happened over the last week or so. So this is out of Democracy Now! This is going to be really interesting as the developments occur. It says military juntas in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso signed mutual defense pact. So this is going to be really interesting. So it says the military leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have signed a mutual defense pact where they agree to help each other militarily against outside aggression and against internal rebellions. The three nations are all former French colonies, which experienced military coups in recent years. This is Mali's Foreign Affairs Minister, Abdoulaye Diop. He says any attack on Western sovereignty and territorial integrity of one or more of the contracting parties will be considered as an aggression against the other parties and will entail a duty of assistance and relief on the part of all parties. So it says this comes as tensions escalating between France and Niger's new military leaders. On Saturday, thousands of protesters rallied outside the French military base in Niger after French President Emmanuel Macron claimed France's ambassador as being held hostage at the French embassy. It says protesters called on French troops to leave Niger. So this is from Isaka Umaru, because we know that Emmanuel Macron is looking for a war pretext to invade our country, but Emmanuel Macron must understand that the people of Niger are determined. Emmanuel Macron must understand that we have understood their game and we are not going to fall into their trap. So this is huge. This actually came out yesterday as a headline, and what's going on in these countries, they're basically saying, no, you are not going to touch any one of us. If you touch one, you're touching all of us. And if you touch one of us and all of us, there's going to be hell to pay. And this really is not just for France. This is really for any Western nation that is really coming to put their grubby little hands into these West African nations for their resources. And now they're saying, absolutely not. You guys do not have carte blanche to come into our nations to determine what you can get, because that's up to us. We have self-determination, we have sovereignty, and we will wield it how we feel so, how we deem it to be so. And so this is really interesting, and pay close attention to what's going on in this region, because a lot of people aren't. And so as this develops further, it could get kind of hairy, especially within this region. And do not be surprised if the West, particularly US, France, Canada, the UK, do not be surprised if they go, there's some terrorist activity going on in these regions. Maybe, just maybe, we should put boots on the ground in order to deliver democracy to that area. It's the same song and dance time and time again. This is what they're going to do, because they want their hands on those resources. They want to steal, but they'll make it seem like, oh, we're just going out there to help them. This is the playbook that the West and imperialist nations have done since time immemorial, and they will continue to do it again. And don't think for a second that they won't. Watch this space. So now I'm going to share this video as well that talks about it. And so this is going to go into a little bit of detail, but then I also have another video that we're going to share that's going to go into a little bit deeper detail as well. So let me share my screen really quick. With the quickness, JB, with the quickness. All right. Enlarge, and let's go.
The military leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have signed a mutual defense pact that binds the signatories to assist one another, including militarily, in the event of an attack on any one of them. Ministerial delegations from the three Sahel countries announced this in Mali's capital, Bamako, on Saturday. The contracted parties undertake to combat all forms of terrorism and organized crime in the common area of the alliance. Called the Liptako-Guma Charter, the pact establishes the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. The Liptako-Guma region, where the Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger borders meet, has been ravaged by jihadism in recent years. Of course, everything starts with security, but the heads of state must also think about economic issues, how to bring the different countries closer together, and how to facilitate trade between our different populations. All these issues will be added to the charter in the coming days. All three countries have undergone coups since 2020, most recently Niger. West African bloc ECOWAS threatened to intervene militarily, but Mali and Burkina Faso quickly responded by offering their military support to Niger.
So that
President Trump.
No, don't want to see him. So that's what's going on as of right now within these countries. They're basically saying that there's safety in numbers. And as we have seen in recent months and within the recent couple of years regarding different nations forming blocs in order to be able to reject the West, we can even see this with the BRICS nations, as they have formed more of not just they already have protection both militarily, but it's more of a block of nations that are now saying economically we need to form a bloc to protect ourselves from Western influence and Western hegemony. So this is what we've been seeing. They actually have more of a protection around the world, so that when the West, particularly like the United States, likes to do sanctions against their nations, then they're more protected against these sanctions by having this economic protection and saying, well, yes, you may be having sanctions against us, but we can go to the other nations, particularly ones like Brazil, India, China, Russia, South Africa. And so because they can do that, now their people aren't going to be as harmed by sanctions as they would typically be if they were just isolated by the West. And so this is why it is so important that they form this bloc. Well, now you also have, in a more localized way, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger going, yes, we're going to do a defensive block. But here's my thing that I'm thinking about. Will they also do a more economic block between them? Or there is a possibility that they can in the future join BRICS in order to also be part of that economic bloc, because you know for sure that France, the UK, Germany, maybe, definitely Canada and United States are going to want to sanction the hell out of these countries and say, well, you guys have coups and you guys have terrorist threats, so therefore we're going to sanction you guys because you guys aren't taking care of them the way that you're supposed to. And so these sanctions mean that they can't trade, but they have an ace in the hole. These nations have resources. So if they say, you know what, that uranium, yeah, that belongs to us, so you can't have it. That oil, you can't have. That cobalt, you can't have. That lithium, you can't have. That gold, you can't have. And if they block them from having it, then really, what resources do these Western nations really have? I don't know about you, but if you ain't got nothing to back it up, you ain't got shit. That tea is good. So that's the thing that a lot of people aren't really counting on, is the fact that these Western nations are saying they're basically bullies. But the thing is that what good is a bully if they ain't got no milk money? And if they can't shake the milk money out of these countries by their ankles, proverbially, if they're broke, they ain't got nothing. Their power is scanty. And so the thing is that what ends up happening is if BRICS comes in and says, okay, we're also going to defend you, because they already have backing of, nations like Russia. China's backing them up as far as money-wise. They're being backed up by Russia. And so if you look at these different countries that are being propped up by these other large nuclear powers, then in reality, like, what can the West really do? The West is like, oh, snap. It's like the bully coming over to beat up the little kid, but then the little kid's big brother comes behind and he's like, yeah, and what? And so this is really the reality. We got to kind of think about these things like schoolyard politics in a way, because the United States tends to be a big bully over the world and says, hey, you know what? Give me your money. And the United States is like, oh, snap. So, yeah, so that's what's going on in there as far as Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And this is really a massive NATO-like alliance from the Sahel nations to defend against greedy West who wants to take their resources. So I just wanted to bring that story up because I think this is really important for us to keep our mind on what's going on around the world, especially within Africa. Because like I said before, Africa is really what I like to call the pantry of the world. And so because of all the resources that it has, a lot of these Western nations want to continue that grab bag and keep on grabbing out of it without actually having to pay for the resources that it takes. And so this also has an effect here in the West as citizens as well. So keep an eye on the story, and I'll try to keep you guys abreast of what's going on ahead. By the way, these nations said that they're against all forms of terrorism, not just terrorism from within their borders, but also terrorism in the form of imperialism. And that is a key point that we need to keep in mind. So I will keep you guys up to date on this story, but I need to cut short because my guest is here. Larry, you're here a little early, but I'm glad to see you. If you are ready, give me a thumbs up as well. All right, so we have our guest with me today. He is a former candidate, as well as a libertarian as well for New York, Mr. sharp political commentator as well. Very smart one too. Good to have you.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I heard what you were talking about. I told you 2:30 in case I was going to be late. I wanted to show respect for your show. So I was able to get here early. So I figured I'd come early. If you wanted to chat, I'm happy to have the conversation. I love what you're talking about in West Africa. Sadly, it's an issue that most people are not talking about.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of times what's going on there really just, it affects us here. It's just, for instance, there was a fact that was brought to me a few weeks back, is that in France, they have over 2,000 gold reserves, but no gold mines. But Mali has over 600 gold mines, but no gold reserves.
Yes.
And that just goes to show that, is it really support that they're giving to Mali, or is it theft? What is your thoughts on that?
No, the problem that we have is we've made these countries just because the Europeans or the Western world decided this was a country. And most of the African people there didn't respect the country because they were tribal at the time. And they cared far more about their tribes than they cared about the actual country. So we just made this country. And now there's 3 or 4 tribes. Half of the tribe is in this country, half the tribe is in that country. They're like, why do we care about these lines you drew in the sand that we haven't cared about for thousands of years? And all of a sudden now you make it a thing. You then impose a government on them. And the reason why we imposed the government wasn't because we cared about the people. It was so we could have more stability to trade. That was the goal, stability to trade, which in theory is not a bad thing. I'm not against stability for trading. That's a wonderful thing. I think more people should have stable lives and trade. But what we didn't do was care about the indigenous people and what they would have thought was an appropriate border, or what they would have thought was an appropriate government system, or whatever the case may be. We didn't do any of that. And I think we're still paying the price for that. Now you have a worse problem. Is Mali really a country in the minds of its own people? Right? In our minds, it is, because we've decided Mali is a country. We decided Niger is a country, right? Now I look at where my ancestors come from. I bring this up because my own ancestors, right? I didn't know where my family came from, as most African Americans don't know. But I did I did 3 separate ancestry.com type things, right? 3 of them. And I found out that my ancestors come from the Hausa tribe. Well, the Hausa tribe is mixed within Cameroon and Nigeria. So am I Nigerian? Am I Cameroonian? Is that a thing? I don't know. What am I? I don't know. And do the Hausa people care? They don't. They're more loyal to Hausa than they are Nigeria, or they are to Cameroon. So now you have civil wars in all these countries, tribe upon tribe, tribal issues that we didn't care about at all. And we didn't. All we cared about is, can I get my gold? Okay, who's the most powerful? Who can I bribe to get my gold? Oh, you're an evil, horrible warlord? It's fine. Can I get my gold? Awesome. Here's money. Here's weapons. Here's guns. Keep these other people in line so I can get my gold. And I think that legacy hasn't gone away yet. And I think that's my biggest worry of West Africa.
Yeah. In fact, I see that, like I said earlier, the United States, as well as France, Canada, Italy, really most of the G7 and largely the G20, I don't see them take this lying down.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you see? What do you see developing within the next 6 to 12 months? Really, 6 to 18 months as far as that region.
Let me go back for a little bit to where I think America really messed up. Okay. If you go back 100 years, most people in Africa and the Middle East loved Americans because we didn't care about physical colonialism back then. We cared only about the money, which is not great, but it was better than the colonialism. We didn't want to control them via government. We sort of make sure that we were trading back and forth. That's where we were 100 years ago. Those days are long gone. We have become colonizers. We become everything bad that we were supposed to not be, right? We were supposed to not. We're colonies, right? We weren't supposed to do that. That's for the bad Europeans, not for us. Boy, did we change our tune on that. So there was a chance for us at one point to actually be better. And we threw it in the garbage. And we followed our fathers instead of actually saying, we did ours. We're going to fight our colonial masters, and we're going to be free. we didn't allow the Africans or anyone else to do so at all. In fact, we supported the French in Vietnam. That's why we fought the Vietnam War, because we didn't want the French to lose Vietnam, right? That's why we're still fighting in Mali. There are still Marines dying in Mali every other year, soldiers every other year dying in Mali, because we have troops there to try to help the French. So what do I think is going to happen? I tell you what is going to happen. It's going to be a bigger problem, and that is probably a proxy war, because Russia and China want to control Western Africa. They want to control for many reasons. One of them is because of what you said earlier, when you're writing the money with this, minerals. Minerals is a key issue in Western Africa. Everything, cobalt, everything you said, uranium, all the things. What other country has a whole lot of minerals? Well, Russia has a whole lot of minerals. And what country wants the most minerals? That will be China. That's why they're doing everything as they try to grow their economy. Their economy is becoming stagnant. They need all its resources. I think Russia, and already you've heard of the Wagner Group or the Wagner Group from Russia is already starting to put troops into Western Africa. But as a general rule, the Western African nations would rather have Russians than have French. Why? Because the Russians will actually, and the Chinese too, will both give them weapons with no strings attached. The French always had strings attached. Right, to your point, they basically wanted to make a bank, right, and force them to put their gold in their bank. The Russians don't care about that. Neither do the Chinese. So my gut says China and Russia will get involved. This will make us very unhappy, and we will find some way to have a proxy war against them. I don't know where that's going to go, but I think somewhere we'll try to find a proxy war against them, because that's where China and Russia will go. China will go with dollars. Russia will go with military.
Interesting. As far as Russia and China, do you think that it's more of a control aspect or more of a friendly trade? Because from what it seems like to me, it's more of like just a trade, friendly trade, versus what the United States and France has been wanting to do in that region.
Well, here's the other issue, right? America has to constantly fight socialism and communism everywhere. It must. If it doesn't, then the past 70 years of Cold War were all a lie. Well, we don't want to say that. It was all a lie, but we don't want to tell people that it was all a lie, right? So we have to keep fighting against, because, if Mali goes socialist, the whole world will be communist tomorrow under one dictator. That's going to happen, right? That's right. Every time, right? That's the story they tell us every single time. That's why we fight every war, right? So we have to, it's almost like if I tell you that I'm a vegetarian and I really want to eat meat, whenever I'm in front of you, I got to not eat the meat. Otherwise I look like an idiot because I said I'm a vegetarian. Even though I like meat, I got to say it. I got to do it in front of you. It's like that. I've told people for decades that if we let any country go socialist, the entire world will be stuck under a one world communist dictatorship. That's what I've told people since 1945.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to keep fighting it. Otherwise, I'm a liar.
Well, yeah, you made a good point there. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So, that's why I think, we need to keep an eye on it. As far as what's going on, especially a lot of us Black people, because a lot of times some of us Black people, we focus on foreign policy, but I think a larger amount of us need to not only keep our eye on domestic policy, but also foreign policy, because that reflects upon us domestically as well. So
yes, I
try to encourage our, Black people. By the way, you said you had ancestors from Cameroon and Nigeria. Well, I guess that makes us cousins, because I did the exact same ancestry.
There you go. See that?
So I'm like a third Nigerian. So we homeboys. So
I knew I liked you. I knew that's why we family is why. We family. That's why. Of course. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. So no, I think the issue that bothers me about this is the largest growth in the next probably 20, 30 years is going to be in Africa. And it's growth it's growth not just in GDP, which is part of it, but also in physical bodies. There are more people in Africa being born in the next couple of years than the rest of the entire world combined.
Wow.
So what are we going to do with all these young men? That's always scary. When you have a bunch of young men and nothing to do, Boy, what do dictators do? What do governments do? Throw them into uniform. They always put them in uniform because that's how we shut them up and get them out of the way. And we got to put them in our uniform. Otherwise, they might be against us. So I got to put them in our uniform. Well, if I got all these guys in uniform, what am I do with them all? There's a country over there. Let's send them over to that country, right? And that happens constantly. The larger you have population with young men, if you don't give them something to do in some way, shape, or form, the more aggressive they are going to be, the more fearful your locals will be, right? America has been so good at having us do two things: having foreign enemies and then divide and conquer internally. America's amazing at that. So we don't care if we have young men. We find ways to fight each other and ways to fight overseas someplace. We're never fighting the elites in America. We don't fight the elites ever, right? We don't do that. We fight internally or we fight overseas. Well, these next countries now to figure the same thing out. Are they going to do internal? And they are, sadly. That's happening. If you notice, there's a lot of civil strife within much of that area under the Sahara. Most of it, they're using the easiest way, which is religious, right? It's the easiest way to make other guy bad. You're a different religion than I am, right? So Muslim, Christian is the biggest issue they have, right? It's an easy way to divide and conquer. They're very good at it. Been doing it for thousands of years. Let's just keep doing that. So that's one thing they've been doing a lot of. But the other worry is, will they fight in other countries? My thing is, if anybody will come in and help these countries to become more stable so that young families can spend more time being more entrepreneurial, on building things internally, supporting their communities, doing whatever's, having young men, and when I say young, I mean men as young as 13 to 19, because in many of these cases, many of these areas, there's no high school. That's not a thing, right? There's elementary school, and that's it. They don't have any other school after that in many parts of these countries. There is no infrastructure to build schools. Well, why aren't they building schools? Well, if you have stability and you're not, and your country, your government isn't drafting you into the army at 15, then you can be building schools and building wells and building whatever you need to build, making a university structure, whatever you need to make in your own communities. You can do that. This is why I'm happy for stability. I hope there is stability. I hate the idea of coups because I always worry that when you do something by violence, you become violent. That's always my worry, right? I hope I'm wrong in this case. And I hope that they don't stay violent and they're able to create stability so their youth can then build the country up, that's how you build the country, through the youth.
Yeah. I hope the same thing as well. I was speaking to Margaret Kimberly a few weeks ago with Black Agenda Report, and she was also talking about how her displeasure with coups and how that she wishes that it would go into civilian hands as soon as possible, so that they can build up the country in a more stable way. And I feel the same sentiments as she does too. So, well,
let me give you an example in our world, the British Empire, right? Of all of the British colonies that got their freedom, we were the ones who did it violently, right? Canada didn't. Australia didn't. Gandhi made sure that India didn't, because Gandhi knew what happens. Which is the most violent country of those? Not even close, us. We were born of war, and we still fight wars all over the country. We became our father. We have literally become our father. We were the rebellious youth. I'm not going to be like you, Dad, British Empire. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be of life and liberty and freedom and all this stuff. And then what did we become? We became the British Empire. We literally just became our father. Our father retired. We took over the store. You're like, I got you, Pop. You retire. I'm taking over the store. We took over the store.
When you think about it like that, yeah. I mean, because this nation started off with genocide, and it continuously keeps genocide going.
That's my worry. That's why she's worried. When you build your country off of violence, you worry if you will continue that legacy. Gandhi, if you remember what your background is on Gandhi, I don't know if you know much about it, but in the case of India, most people in India, when Britain was fighting World War I, wanted to rebel. Britain's fighting World War I, now it's time to rebel. When Britain was getting its ass kicked by the Germans in World War II, right? A lot of Indians were like, now it's time to fight. Fight against the British, throw them out of India. They can't fight us and the Germans. And Gandhi was adamant. He was like, no, we will leave peacefully. The British will leave as friends. They will not leave as enemies. He was adamant. Why? He thought the same way she does. and has the same worry that I have. Right, that was his mindset. And India is generally a peaceful country. They do have border wars here against Pakistan and China. They're not totally peaceful, but compared to us, I mean, they're pretty peaceful.
Well, yeah.